This is Lama Tantrapa. Welcome to the second webinar of our program dedicated to making this year 2016, your best year to date. Thank you for Sheldon for joining me on this webinar.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Now, let's see how we can begin our exploration today by discussing how important it is to understand where we are at the present moment in our lives, because obviously our journey will begin from wherever we're at. And it's essential to know well where we are right now, because if we understand where we are, then we will also understand what the relationship is between where we are versus where we want to be. And then we'll be able to chart our journey a lot more efficiently. Now, what would you say, Sheldon, about your current state of affairs? Do you feel like you're fully satisfied with all areas of your life right now?
I'd say no. I'd say there's some areas that I want to improve, even though there's some areas of satisfaction and there's some areas that need a lot of work and attention.
Right, and that's probably something that applies to most of us. If we have total 100% satisfaction with each and every area of our lives, that means we've reached the pinnacle of personal development. There's nowhere else to grow, there is nowhere else to expand or learn anything. That's very unlikely. So let's see how we can explore different aspects of our lives in regard to where we are in terms of our level of satisfaction. And I usually measure satisfaction rather than dissatisfaction. Obviously, what you focus your attention on, that's where energy begins to flow. If you focus on dissatisfaction, guess what? You're going to be giving more power to the dissatisfying thoughts, or the thoughts of how frustrated you are with the current state of affairs. Instead, we will be measuring satisfaction. In other words, how satisfied you are with your current conditions or current lifestyle. And also, I suggest measuring on a rather precise scale from 1 to 100. So we're talking about 100% satisfaction, that's at one end of the scale, and the opposite end is totally dissatisfied. So we're not going to measure everything at once. We're actually going to take a look at specific areas of our lives, because that is going to give us a lot more insight, and also it will allow us to see which areas are our strengths and where there are our weakness. Make sense?
Yeah. May I ask, how do we find out how to improve our lives, or what to focus on?
Well, let's do a little experiment or an exercise. I have a piece of paper, and I'm going to draw a circle, a big, big circle, occupying pretty much the entire piece of paper. Would you do the same, Sheldon? And I invite all of our viewers and listeners to do this experiment with us. Just grab a piece of paper. I'm using a clipboard for it. You can just use a desk or a table and a pen or a pencil, and just draw a big circle. It doesn't have to be perfect. This is not an exercise in circle drawing, but something like this. Essentially, a big circle that you can divide in 6 slices, like here are slicing pizza. So 6 slices, basically we'll divide it in 6 equal portions. In a sense, we are creating a pie chart, crisscrossing the circle in the middle, more or less evenly. Again, it's not an exercise in drawing perfect circles or creating perfect pie chart. And what we're going to do is we're going to name each of these segments. Let's start with the one on top, or closest to the top. And we're going to go around the circle following clockwise direction. For most people, health and wellness is one of the areas that is particularly important. Many people come to Qigong teachers and Qigong coaches seeking improvement in health and wellness. So let's call health and wellness our number one sector of the circle. So if this one was at 12 o'clock, the next one is going to go at 2 o'clock. Is career and finances. Let's take a look at the third one. We call it hobbies and sports, which may include also martial arts or other exercise disciplines and practices. And if you practice martial arts, it can be one of the hobbies. If you do some other sports, whether it's golfing or surfing, that may also go in there. And the fourth one is family and intimate relationships. The fifth one is social life and social contribution. And the last but not the least, personal and spiritual development. So we have 6 general areas of life. Some people would say, wait a moment, you didn't include something very important. Or some people would say, this is too many, I only have 4 or 5. Well, obviously, this is the most generic and most simple distribution of interests and different areas of life that most of us experience. And some of them may also intersect. For example, if you're a professional athlete, well then career and finances may intersect with hobbies and sports. Or for example, if you're a healer, then health and wellness may have to do with career and finances. Or for example, if you are, let's say, a religious worker or a minister, well, perhaps then spiritual development goes hand in hand with your career and finances, and so on. What we're going to look at next is something really simple. The level of current degree of satisfaction with the way that things are going in this specific area of life. So for example, if I ask you, Sheldon, and this is the question I also pose to all of our viewers, how satisfied are you with your current state of health and wellness? On a scale from 1 to 100, with 100 being totally satisfied and 1 completely unsatisfied, where would you put yourself on that scale?
65, 70.
65 and 70. Very nice. So what we're going to do is we're going to consider that the point of intersection of these lines dividing the circle into pie chart is the 0. And from there we go out to the periphery. And 100 is going to be on the outer edge of the pie chart. So let's mark on this line the point that corresponds to the current level of your satisfaction with the health and wellness on the line dividing health and wellness from career and finances. So we can say 65. Very nice. Let's take a look at the next aspect of our lives, which is career and finances. How satisfied are you with that area of your life, John?
I could be much more satisfied.
Okay, so there is room for improvement.
Yeah.
On the scale from 1 to 100, where would you put yourself?
I'd say 40 right now.
40? Fair enough. Let's put the mark on this line at 40, on the line between career and finances and hobbies and sports. And then let's move on to the next area of life, which is hobbies and sports. How satisfied are you with that area of your life now?
That's probably one of the areas I'm more satisfied.
Cool.
I get to do my hobby in sports a lot. So from 1 to 100, that one is about like 85.
Fantastic. Great. Let's mark that closer to the periphery. And let's take a look at family and intimate relationships. How satisfied are you with that area of your life?
Well, I'd love to see my family work a lot. So I would say that one would probably be 35.
Let's mark 35 on the line. And let's move on to the next one, which is social life and social contributions. Where would you put yourself on that scale?
Don't get out as much as I did when I was younger. mostly everything's business related now.
Hmm.
So I put that one down at like 25.
25. Wow, okay. And the last but not the least is personal and spiritual development. How satisfied are you with that area of your life?
I'd say like 50% because a lot of my work has to do with that. So I get to do it, but one of those things where I feel like there's a lot of room for growth, but I feel good that I'm getting to do it actively.
Very cool. So, as you can see, there is a gamut of answers that we get from just looking at these six scales or six areas of life. Anything from 25 to 85%. Well, that's obviously something that creates not really great balance in life. By and large, when I work with people who have been feeling particularly satisfied, it's not only that they are at the higher level of satisfaction in each of the areas, but also the areas are more or less leveled together. So in other words, they may be at 80 or 85 or higher level of satisfaction in each and every one of them. Now, let me ask you, which of these areas would you feel needs most attention right now?
I would definitely say family. Like I said, I spend a lot of time working, and most of my time is at someone's office or running around or teaching. So I would definitely say family probably needs the most.
Even though it's not the least satisfying is social life and contributions. But I'm not here to tell you what you should be focusing attention. It's actually completely okay to decide, social life is at 25, but actually family is more important to me, so I'm going to dedicate more attention to it. Now, let's take a look at the imaginary movie about your whole life. If you just imagine that there is a movie produced about your life and you can fast forward or rewind it, let's fast forward it to the end of the year, 2016. If I ask you to give me a description of a snapshot of where you would be by the end of the year, would you be able to tell me how satisfied you would be with your health and wellness?
Yeah. I think I'd be probably at a good 85.
85%. Nice. Well, let's put the new mark on the line between health and wellness and career and finances. And that is 85. Great. We'll get back to it in a minute. But let's take a look at career and finances. How satisfied do you think you will be by the end of the year if you manifest your dream of what you aspire to manifest this year?
Well, now having a 40, I definitely think I'd be at least to 60, 65 if I achieve the goals I have set for this year.
Okay, 60, 65. So which one is it going to be, 60 or 65?
Oh, 65.
Great. Okay. Now let's take a look at hobbies and sports. You're already doing great. But if I ask you to imagine yourself at the end of the year, how satisfied would you be if you feel like you've manifested all you would aspire to manifest this year?
That one would probably be like, it wouldn't even be that big of a jump. It would just probably be like 90%.
Okay. Great. Let's take a look at family and intimate relationships. Right now it's at 35% of satisfaction. How satisfied would you feel by the end of the year if you manifest and live your dream that you aspire to manifest this year?
I would love to get to 75 or 80%.
Okay, so which one is going to be, 75 or 80?
I'm going for 80.
80. Great.
Let's go for 80, Bob.
Got it. Okay. And social life and contributions. Right now you're at 25. Where would you aspire to be by the end of this year?
I could be at 35%.
35%. So apparently it's not that high on your list of priorities.
Nope.
Yeah, some people, especially later in their lives, for them to create contribution or perhaps to build a legacy is very important. And usually it doesn't happen until maybe middle age. So obviously you are a relatively young guy, so it's not a big deal at this point in time. Let's take a look at personal and spiritual development. Where would you like to be by the end of the year in terms of this area of your life, Sheldon?
Wow, I mean, of course I'd love to be at 100%. I mean, there's no doubt about that. I don't think I'll get there by the end of the year, but I definitely feel like I can get to 85%.
85%. Fantastic. So what happens is that we develop clarity not only about where we are, but also where we want to be. Now, it seems like each and every one of these areas would be improving if you manifest and live your dream that you set out to manifest this year. But how would you know that you accomplished what you want to accomplish in terms of health and wellness? If I ask you in December of 2016 about your health and wellness, how would you say you know for sure that you've achieved the 85% level of satisfaction with it?
I know that I feel better physically. I'm not. I mean, right now I feel pretty good. I don't get sick that often. I do a lot of qigong, but I'd love to feel better. I'd love to eat better. I'd love to, I'd love to feel even that much more better. So I feel like if I do all of my practices and do everything that I'm supposed to do, I'll reach where I need to go.
Nice. Okay, and let's take a look at career and finances. How would you know that you've achieved what you aspire to achieve, which is 65% level of satisfaction, by the end of this year?
For me, it'd be a lot more financial independence and less reliance on a job. More on doing my own business, and my own business is sustaining my life.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. And how about hobbies and sports? Not a huge jump, but a little bit of an improvement. How would you know that you've achieved it?
For this year, it would definitely be that everything that I learned in the previous year, I did it actively through the entire year, and that I see the improvement from the work. So it would just be really just an act of diligence on all of the things that I learned.
Very nice. And how about your family and your relationships?
I see them a lot more. I guess I don't miss out on big events in life. Trying to, handle the things that I'm available. So those would be the ways that I would know. And the look on my family's face would tell me everything.
I see. Okay. And let's take a look at social life and your social contributions. How do you know that you've achieved 35% of satisfaction with that?
Some of this is entangled in my career. Some of my career is, very social aspect. I think I'd be able to reach more people. I'd be able to globally affect more people, but not necessarily that I have to physically change location all the time, but that I actually my reach will grow. So I would know that by the amount of relationships that I'm able to.
Very cool. And in terms of personal and spiritual development, how would you know that you've achieved the progress that you aspire to achieve?
I would have breakthroughs more regularly, and all things I would see them as, I see this already, but just more learning, more growth. I've learned more about myself, learned more about humanity. I think that would be how I would know what I've learned and how I relate to the world.
Great. And self-knowledge, obviously, is one of the key aspects of personal and spiritual growth. I think it was the Temple of Apollo in Delphi in ancient Greece, where they initially put this slogan, "Know yourself." And of course, knowing yourself is basically one of the primary objectives of any spiritual discipline that's worth its salt. Now, one of the ways to know yourself is also to pay attention to the bigger picture. So if you integrate all of these pieces of the puzzle together into one picture that you would like to achieve by the end of the year, can you paint the picture with the words to me of what it would look like? Like if I meet you, for example, on December 30th of 2016, what will I see that will be a depiction of your achievement of what you set out to achieve?
Yeah, I think like health and wellness wise, you'll see more energy. You'll see more levels of mobility and activity. As far as career and finance, like I said, you'll see that there's more independence. There's more movement forward, and maybe even more ventures that are taking place. Hobbies and sports, it kind of goes along with health and wellness because my hobbies are health and wellness, arts. So those kind of go along hand in hand. All of the things that I've learned, you'd see those active. Family, my family would have some, my family has great things to say about me now, but, they have even more like experiences with me and memories and, loving moments and stuff like that. And that would be great. And then social life, I'd be able to, you'd see me out and about more often, socializing, traveling, and then personal and spiritual development. Of course, more self-knowledge, more self-honesty. I think that would be really clear. And my ability to adapt and respond to the world.
Fantastic. Well, it sounds like a really excellent, bringing all the 6 pieces of the puzzle together. And since we are talking about Qigong coaching, it's obviously an energy art. So how do we bring energy awareness into it? Well, they mentioned from the get-go when you're talking about health and wellness that you would have more energy. How else would you describe your energy, for example, from fly on the wall perspective? If the fly doesn't care about what you look like, it just pays attention to your energy. What would the fly see in terms of color, texture, movement, or any other qualities of energy that you would have associated with that new way of being?
The new way of being would definitely be more even and more consistent. Less ups and downs, less peaks and valleys. It's more of a consistent energy. Less, like I said, less peaks and valleys. It would be
even keel.
Even keel, yeah.
Well, in Buddhism, there is a term called equanimity. Perhaps it has something to do with what you just described.
Yes, I would say equanimity would be a great word to use.
Cool. Now, let's take a look at the current energetic state. If you imagine being able to perceive yourself right now from fly on the wall perspective, how would you describe the energy at the present time?
At the present time,
associated with your current level of satisfaction with all these areas of life we just talked about.
Right now, moment, as I'm working hard to achieve my goals, there's a lot of work that's involved. And that's why my goal is to have less work keeping my energy. It's like being off balance is the reason why it's heavier. And if there was balance, it wouldn't be so heavy.
So in other words, the imbalanced and heavier energy associated with the current state of affairs probably has to do with the way that you are currently living your life, right?
Right.
And if you continue using the same energy throughout the rest of the year, what's the likelihood of you actually achieving what you aspire to achieve by the end of the year?
Well, I mean, if it stayed exactly where it's at now, there'd be a crash at some point. That's why I'm hoping for a payoff, kind of like the the ants before winter. I'm getting ready for the winter, so that's kind of why there's so much work. But if I was trying to stay consistent at this level, I'd burn out.
I see. So in our next webinar, we'll actually go through the exploration of energy practice associated with understanding how to transition from the current way of being to the way of being associated with manifestation of your dream, and also perhaps some intermediate steps that would lead to it. Obviously, it's not going to be just an instant switch energetically from where you are now to where you aspire to be by the end of the year. It's going to be probably a series of transition steps. And that's exactly what we also call strategy. So our next webinar will be dedicated to developing such strategy. After we have already identified the areas of strengths and weaknesses in our webinar today. Now, do you have any questions for me, Shelby?
Yeah. How do we compare the current state to the one that we want by the end of the year? I mean, I guess there's some tools here, but maybe you can elaborate on that a little bit.
Right. So we have a number of practices that allow us to basically assess where we are energetically right now, and also where would I need to be by the end of the year. It's basically a visualization. It's a form of a daydream. Obviously, whenever we think of future, it's a figment of our imagination. It's a daydream. But everything in dreams is made of energy. And that's really important consideration to keep in mind. Because if we understand that our image is made of energy and everything that we consider would be happening throughout the year is also an energetic development, an energetic process, then we start looking at which aspects of energies are changing, which aspects are staying the same. Are there any dynamics associated with this change? For example, there may be some breakthroughs where one energy is completely let go of or being replaced with a new one. Perhaps some energies that are currently kind of on the back seat can actually be brought front and center, be in a driver's seat, so to speak, become a driving force that would allow you to move in the direction where you want to go. Some energies that may be blocking your progress perhaps can be addressed in a way that we don't have to break through them, like destroy them. They may even serve us as tools in the future. So we don't want to destroy energy. Besides, we know probably from the study of thermodynamics that energy cannot be created or destroyed. It just changes. And so what we do is we don't try to get rid of energy or destroy it. We just simply learn how to navigate energetically. And it has a lot to do with our sense of identity, how we identify with certain energies. In other words, we unconsciously tune into particular frequencies of energies that we identify with. And if we change our sense of identity, if we change the sense of who we think we are, automatically we will be tuning into different frequency of energy. Does it make sense?
Yes, perfect sense.
So it actually goes really deep. We really work on our sense of identity, transforming our sense of who we are and developing a new, perhaps more functional or optimized way of perceiving ourselves and the world around us. This optimization, it's almost like hacking a computer or like jailbreaking an iPhone. We literally set ourselves free from being stuck in this walled garden that Apple built for us, a particular program that would have been kind of programmed by society or by our bringing or by the media, and we develop a much greater sense of freedom, as opposed to thinking, well, this is how I am, this is how I've always been, this is how I'll be for the rest of my life, so I don't have any choice to be somehow else. If we stop thinking this way and we develop greater mobility or malleability, of our identity. That will create a much greater chance of success.
Makes sense. So it's interesting when you even talked about the mobility and malleability of the sense of self. I believe it does, but do you believe that that correlates even to how the body responds? Once the mind is free, does the body become free as well?
Absolutely. The mind and the body are not two separate entities. It's one and the same organism. I really like to use the analogy or a metaphor of a coin. A proverbial coin, which we often say, well, each coin has two sides. So you can look at one side of the coin, for example, heads, which is representing the mind. You can look at the other side of the coin, called the tails, representing the body. And we can graciously say, well, we have a mind and we have a body, and there is some kind of correlation between them. The energy arts is actually about shifting our awareness, focusing it not on the surface or superficial images on the sides of the coin. We are looking at the essence of the coin. What is it made of? And in the case of a human being, it's made of energy. Just like everything is made of energy in this universe, actually. So what we do is we learn how to pay attention to the stuff that the coin is made of, not just the images on the side, one side or the other. Then it allows us to also align one side with the other. Sometimes coins are minted in a way that the heads are not pointing in the same direction where the tails are pointing. I've seen quite a few of those, and it's bizarre, but they mint coins like that. The same thing happens with humans. As a matter of fact, we are not always in alignment. Sometimes the mind and the body are not synchronized, so to speak. So another aspect of the energy practices is to actually synchronize or align the physical body and what we call soma with the psyche or our consciousness in a way that they would work together, hand in hand. Instead of one pulling in one direction and the other one pulling in the other direction, which only contributes to feeling like we're falling apart, we actually learn how to create a synergy between the mind and the body in a way that we realize it's a unified energetic system. And we learn how to work with the energy of that system so that each aspect's mind and body follows suit. Did I answer your question?
Yes. And it kind of brings me to the next one. Where do you get the energy to achieve the dream, or how do you get access to the resources that you need to achieve said dream?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting that we don't always operate on all the energies available to us. As a matter of fact, people sometimes say, well, we're not even using our consciousness fully. Maybe 10 or so percent of the mind actually is being utilized. Our mental resources are mostly dormant. And if that wasn't true, we wouldn't have been able to learn anything. The mere fact that we can learn things, it means that we can bring things from the area or the realm of unconscious or unknown into the realm of known. I often like to use the metaphor of an iceberg. So the tip of the iceberg is basically a representation of what we know about ourselves, about our energies, and pretty much the whole world. Now, the huge part of the iceberg that's underwater is what we don't know about ourselves and our world. There are plenty of energetic resources residing in that hidden underwater part of the iceberg, which we usually don't have access to. So an important part of our practice of Qigong coaching is to create a clear interface between the tip of the iceberg and the rest of it. Through this clear window, we can actually see what's going on down there. And we may be able to connect with some of the resources that previously were unavailable, or perhaps we didn't even know that we had them. Now, what is this interface, by the way? We will be talking about it in our future webinars, but I'm happy to divulge now. the interface is called awareness. Basically, awareness is what allows whatever used to be unknown to become known. Right? There is no way to bring into the realm of known something that we didn't know before without awareness. Basically, that's what the word means. We become aware of it. Now, awareness is the ability to pay attention to that which used to be unknown so that it would become known. Without attention, there is no chance to learn anything because we can't even remember things that we don't pay attention to. So we literally learn how to develop quality of attention that allows us to connect with those energy resources within ourselves. And sometimes we also realize that it's easier to identify resources within other people than to notice them within ourselves. For example, we may run into a wise person and we may be so impressed with their wisdom that we forget that we have wisdom within ourselves too. Okay, all that means is that that person actually has been tapping into that energy resource within themselves associated with being wise. So that wisdom doesn't just become their default state from birth. It's basically something that they've been cultivating. They've been tapping into that resource consistently enough that they've identified with it and made it a major driving force in their lives. Well, that's what we can do for ourselves. And if we don't know where to find that wisdom within us yet, well, at least we can mimic the wisdom of another person. Not just the wisdom, but the energy associated with being wise. In other words, we're not concerned with the content of information that the wise person knows. We actually tap into the way of being associated with being wise. Now, that wise way of being has some qualities to it that perhaps other ways of being don't have. Let's say authenticity. It's really hard to be a wise person without being authentic. If you're just repeating what everybody else is saying, there isn't much wisdom in that. A parrot can do that. Or, for instance, trusting yourself. It's really hard to be wise and actually reveal your wisdom if you don't trust yourself and your knowledge. In other words, you'll feel incongruent or incompetent, and so you will never actually spew your wisdom, so nobody will ever think that you're wise if you don't have self-confidence. And so on. Basically, there are many aspects to each of these qualities, to each of these ways of being that we're talking about. Energetic awareness is what allows us to kind of capture the essence of the state of being. This is kind of an ontological approach to coaching. We're not just talking about what we need to do and develop certain milestones and try to hit the goals. We actually learn how to be that way that we aspire to be. And by doing that, the manifestation of our dreams becomes almost automatic. It's just simply we exist in a new state of consciousness and a new way that we function in the world, and everything that we come in touch with is influenced by that new way of being that we develop, and we experience the world through new lenses of perception. That's essentially how we create our new sense of reality that we would call a dream come true. The manifestation happens as a result of us tapping into the new way of being and developing it as our standard operating procedure, as it were, rather than just trying to do things according to certain protocol or certain strategy. Does it make sense?
Perfect sense. Really great stuff. That concludes all the questions that I have. Thank you for sharing and enlightening us with that wisdom on the energy arts and how it relates to achieving dreams and how to make that gap between reality and dreams smaller.
Well, we'll work on that a lot more in our next webinar. I want to thank you, Sheldon, for taking your time to explore this practice with me, and I want to thank all of our viewers for participating. Please don't forget to continue exploring your pie chart of different aspects of your life. We will be using it over the course of the year to assess where we are in each of these areas over the course of the year. Obviously, there may be some points in time when we really progress fast. Sometimes it may feel like we've reached a plateau. We'll have ways to deal with that as well. Until then, have a wonderful time. Namaste.
That's it.